Hey, Pacific. Yeah. No, but hey, let's see. Can I? What's up? Okay, I don't know how to use this program. Is the audio working? Where's my glasses? I don't know. There's some way of me sending a link in theory, and there being multiple cams or something. So it's like, have you used this memes? I sent a link out to my friend Jason Louv, who runs a channel Ultra Culture. It's like a culture and stuff like that channel. Because I was just on his. We just did an interview together. He had me interviewed. Anyways, there's some. No, this is like built into YouTube now. This is like YouTube multitasking thing. It's not YouTube Live, it's YouTube Group or something, but I don't know how to operate it correctly. So yeah, so who did I run into? Oh, there's this physicist who I was watching recently. It's like I agree with everything except that he still uses quantum field, and I just think that that's like not the best model. Yeah, this is that new mode that they introduced on YouTube. I think it's going to be very much YouTube and Twitter battling it out. I don't know. Maybe it's just I don't like in a quantum field. How do you achieve rotation in a quantum field? Like, how is that? What's the? You know, I mean, I think it comes down to a causality thing for me. You know, what is prime mover, and then how do you go from that to everything that you see? And if gravity is prime mover, then that just everything just happens, right? Gravity condenses, stretches space, creates charge. Curl develops just innately because of interfaces of fluids of various densities. Fluid dynamics, you create a curl, now you've got some spin, now you've got some charge, and all of a sudden you've got mass. Like, what's a neutrino in quantum field theory? How is that exactly described if it's a... And how is that localized? It's like around a center point. There's a slightly expanding field of twistiness. I don't know. I mean, neutrinos are very difficult. They're weird. As I said, when I usually talk about them, I think of them as like the Aharonov bone particle. All curl. Right? Okay. So like in my model, basically it's like a proton is mass, which creates convergence of space, which creates positive charge. The surrounding divergence created by this convergence, the reciprocal, is the electron and the electric field. These are just, this is part of the unit. One creates the other. It's the other side of the geometry. But a neutrino is like all curl without any inflow or outflow, purely curl. And therefore it has no charge because there's no inflow or outflow, as in here. It's pure spinniness. And then when the spinniness, when pure curl interacts with an inflow, or I mean an outflow, that becomes a mass unit that takes this photon, positive and negative components, spins it around. So now you have a mass unit, which has an inflow, has an outflow, and it also has curl, all integrated into one unit. Rather than being a neutrino, which is just the curl part, or just a charge, which is just an inflow or an outflow, by combining those two, you have this, this new kind of machine. See, this is why I just feel like fluid dynamics model just seems more, it's just more innately understandable. Maybe it's just for me. It just seems like, to me, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. It's a swirl. Only you have to be able to imagine inflows and outflows as if they can just lead to no place or someplace, but it doesn't matter where. To me, the problem with strings is that each one is this closed unit rather than being like, I would only believe in string theory if there was only one string. And the universe is one really, really, really big, complicated, singular knot with sub portions, and you would like untie some of the knot over here, but then you'd have this loop and you'd have to transfer that loopiness down to another part. Oh yeah, there was this great interview. It was like a talk that Jonathan and Stephen gave together. It was like at a desk at some little officey thing a while ago, and then they did a broadcast of it. But in it, I mean, essentially, I think it's like, that's the thing. What they describe and a fluid dynamic model are in the way the same, except that they're doing it computationally, so there's a discreteness to it. But as soon as you have more than one, more than one thing using a singular causal edge, that's essentially an increase in density, right? Because now you're having what you could take this much room, they're going along the same edge, so they're taking up less room. And how much that happens relates to density. And if they all converge, if all paths end up converging on a singular point, then you have a singularity because it gets too crowded. I have not studied spinners, twisters, anything like that. I just want to understand the substratum, which is why I keep on hawking this new hydrodynamic solution to the Schrodinger equation that I found, which I just think is, that's the. Okay, well, mass is green, right? And so there's no charge. So the only component is the spin component if it's a neutrino or an anti-neutrino. But I would actually suspect that neutrinos are particularly difficult to determine in that way, because it's only the chirality, right, which has to do with what side of the manifold you came from in my model, I guess. So wait, let's see. Okay, so here's a proton, right? 3 axes of charge, positive charge, and a mass photon in the middle. Yeah, Navier-Stokes, only we would have to apply, like I don't do this kind of stuff, but one of you guys could. I think we'd have to apply the Friedman metric to the space. That's the thing. It's like what the problem with quantum is, like, okay, you have a really, really high density of energy, but what is that doing to the metric? That's condensing the metric, just the same way mass would, only not quite as much, right? It's warping space-time around that density of energy, which is why a neutron has this shell of energy, right? It's like so dense around the periphery, wrapped around a Planck, because that's the minimum curl that is possible in space-time. It's part of the innate nature of whatever the thickness of space-time. Yeah, Heisenberg is, I don't know. I feel like this whole probability thing was just like a complete error. And instead it's percentage of flow that is laminate to the direction of your vector or whatever. It's like, you can apply it statistically as a probability, but instead you could say, well, of all the particles in this flow, this percentage of them were going this fast at this vector. I mean, because the thing is, it all averages out, right? You could have one particle that's going really, really super fast through here. The rest of them could just be sitting, but that has the same energy as if they were all going at this average pace. This is why the statistics sort of to me, take away information. You're taking away the physicality of it so that you can try and understand, like, this quark math. How has this been sitting around? And yet nobody thinks of it as being these 3 axes of charge, but it's 3/3. And because it was a numerical value that was written down as a numerical value, it was just a numerical value. It had no innate physical qualities. But all of a sudden, as soon as you do this wraps into the, like, quaternions, symmetries in charge, YEM symmetries. This is why I was on my Tumblr. I was like, the problem with being shown something is that if somebody shows it to you, then you don't look at it. You're just like, oh, that's what it is, and you'll accept that, and you won't, like, often you won't dig deeper. Well, a wave does develop. That's the thing. Like, if you look at it from a fluid dynamics view, if you have 2 shear flows, or one flow over another, and there's a different density, right? What happens is waves form of particular frequencies depending on the nature of the material. And then those waves end up becoming vortexes. It's like at the interface, this is what I think the layers of, like, let's say an electron, and then there's the tau and the muon, whatever these, you have an electron. Okay, so this is just a sphere of charge. This would be outflows. An electron. Let's just pretend for a second we're just having an electron floating in space by itself. Okay, it's an outflow. If it's a really big outflow, then what you would have is a whole set of secondary swirls of a similar size, but the next sphere, the next orbital, because this had enough energy that it starts to interact with that. And then you could go even one step further. This is why they don't last that long, because it doesn't take much energy to disrupt something that's so tenuous. I mean, you just give it a little like jolt, and all of a sudden you've broken a little bit of this, structure breaks down, and it reverts and reverts. Whereas the electron is the fundamental size, and therefore you don't, it's really hard to make fractional electrons. You know. Why 3 dimensions? Like, why are there only 3 fields? I don't know. Is it like, is it an it's like an evolution? I don't know. I mean, at some point, like, I don't like to get into too metaphysical, because it's like, let's just, because, you can go anywhere at that point. It's like, oh, with my mind, I'm touching the place in space, the aleph, where everything is happening simultaneously and it's all there. And it's like, yeah, I believe that and all. But how does the world work in a sort of like more functional, mechanistic level, so that we can turn it into insane technology where I have like, like, when is my cell phone going to create an anti-gravity field so I can hold it and I can start flying? Yeah, I'd need to learn some currently accepted frameworks, because all of this has just been evolved organically from sort of like my first principles, and then looking at what do we know, like, what are these things with these cores, how does this make sense, how do we make this make sense? Oh, because there's now and there's forward and there's backward from now, therefore 3. There's the unity, and then there's the 2 divergences from unity, and this makes 3. But doesn't that third thing, isn't that third thing having its own moment? Or is that the whole thing? It's like there's you, there's the thing you're observing, which is actually just a reflection of you. And there is the things that happen sort of interstitially in the gap between you and your reflection. I mean, it's like, it is crazy. It's like, 3 lines make a closed space. 3 poles make a stable structure. 3 axes are what you unite to describe a sphere, or it could be a cube, or it could be a cubic dodecahedron, or a rhombic dodecahedron, like in my thing. This is the idea that you need the third observer to determine a relationship between these two things. Otherwise, how do they draw their relationship to each other? They are connected this way, but this determines sort of like a relative position. Right? Yeah, and the comparison between yourself and your reflection and the interference caused by those two things is the content of the hologram, right? It's the difference between the same signal. It's the differences created between one signal on two different journeys. One includes the object in the hologram and one didn't include the object in the hologram, and it's the comparison of those things. Yeah. No, I totally get you. I mean, that's the thing. It's like the surface of every event horizon is like, of course, holographic universe. I mean, if it's one continuous thing, then how can it be anything else? And it's almost like the surface of every event horizon is the reflection. And the reflection between all these surfaces creates the energies in between, which we see as the galaxies and all that other stuff that's not the singularities themselves. You know, we are the interference pattern between all the singularities. Yeah, it's just the start and the ending concept of Penrose. It's just like neutron decay solves it all. Solves it all. Okay, neutron decay is the Aleph. Neutron decay is white holes. You know, you become neutronium. The neutronium becomes the vacuum energy. Vacuum energy drips out when there's so little curve that there should be some curve there. The universe throws in some curve. You know, this is the thing. Neutron to gaseous hydrogen is white holes. It's just, of course, it's not localized. Why would it be localized? Actually, that makes no sense because it's the opposite of being localized. The singularity is localized. Instead, the white hole is the entire surface of the universe, the energy surface of the universe, and everything drips in from the periphery towards the center, and that's the flow. Because this point and this point actually are the same. They're connected. But I'm super excited. I think all these things are, all these things are going to be confluent in the next few years. We will be renovating and looking at this whole thing again. As I said, to me, it's like a fluid dynamics model works very well, but for other people, other models work. The point is understanding, and the more ways you can look at something, the better you understand, in my opinion. In my model, a neutron is 2 layers of photons trapped over the, their Coulomb forces attracting them, plus rotation and gravity, basically. And I think I've posted it. Somebody posted this, like if you just look up a 2 pi Planck frequency photon, which would be exactly the size of a photon that would fit over a Planck sphere, the energy is such that the Schrodinger radius is 1 Planck, therefore it actually, a 2 pi Planck radius wavelength photon has the energy to create a singularity of circumference 2 pi Planck. Right? And then the neutron decays. The external layer of the neutron decays because perturbations, because it's slightly larger than 2 pi. The first photon was 2 pi. That makes mass in both proton and neutron. That's the model, is that you have one photon that's this big. This is the proper one. This is inside of every proton and inside of every neutron. A neutron has an extra layer on top, but because this has got to be a little bit bigger, whatever that hydrogen band thing, gap, minimal thing is, 100 and 137th. Anyways, because it's slightly larger, this has got a perturbation. In the context of a nucleus, where there's all this additional gravitational and Coulomb forces holding it, like pulling it down into the mass, the gravity that is a nucleus, it's stable, just like it is stable when it's in a neutron star. But if you could take a little bit of neutronium from a neutron star and take it out of the context of the neutron star so that it didn't have that much, some gravitational field, it would no doubt decay very promptly into a whole bunch of neutrons, and then the neutrons would decay as they do. The exterior photon decays, and it becomes a proton surrounded by an electron, but I don't have one big enough to surround it, but this is the other thing, okay? And it becomes these 2 charged components. This was the positive part of the photon that decayed. This is the negative part of the photon that decayed. So that becomes the shell of the proton, the exterior part, and one of the mass units, because I don't think these things ever go away. We don't know how to break up these. And I don't think maybe it's just impossible. This is the way the universe, since the universe existed, if it ever didn't exist, these always exist. But that's not to say that there might not be a limited amount, or even if the universe is infinite, the universe could still obey conservation just because, in my opinion. Anyways, but that seems to make a lot of sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, the photon. Okay, so electron, positron is just the opposite of this, which is why they don't last here, because it's on the wrong side. It's like chirally the wrong side of the membrane. It's going to get pushed. Any positron is going to get pushed down. Since it's an inflow, it'll just go whoop, and be shrunk up by any local electrons in a split second. It's got no mass to resist that. Proton, antiproton would be basically this, only with little yellow balls. And that would be outflow. So you'd think that an antiproton, might last a while. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Okay, I totally have not looked this up, but I think of all weird particles, it seems to me like an antiproton might have a chance of lasting a bit. Then you've got your neutron. And all those other muon particles and stuff like this, all these weird composites that don't have 3 axes of charge, nor are in rotation to eliminate the need for that. Okay, all those other particles, what do they last? Like 10 to the negative 17th seconds, this and that. It's like they're not particles. They're intermediary states between this stable particle, a neutron, and this stable particle, a proton. okay? And the neutrino is purely the curl component. When a neutron, so this would be have a photon in orbit around it, right? Trapped in its own orbit, but a little perturbation. Perturbation gets severe, breaks apart. Now we have the inflows and outflows, but the rotation seems to happen, like curl doesn't have to have inflow or outflow. You can have curl where the net is zero volumetric change, right? And that's what a neutrino would be, is all curl, but no inflow or outflow. You combine the inflow or outflow with some charge, and now you've got a mass particle with charge, like a proton or an antiproton. Yeah, so I mean, all of these things are like balls, but really this should be, that's why that other animation that I did using the geocalc shows these as like basically the reverse of a sphere is a hyperbolic surface that's a funnel down into the opposite, the missing sphere space, right? So positive, the electron would be, one axis would be this field coming out like this, like this, like this, like this, but they sum sphere. And then we can start to look at like, oh, why are electron, because I really think that the electron field is basically the everted interior of the proton, because holograms, right? Like whatever field things are happening here in proton in positive field should be mimicked even by field theory, reciprocated inversely charge wise in a larger space, exactly one scale dimension outward. Yeah, I'm gonna have to learn these matrix things eventually. I should take a remedial, just like first year particle physics. I just haven't bothered because I really just find it like, I don't want to learn a bunch of stuff that I think is wrong and then have to figure out what is wrong with it. But you know, it would be useful. But I really think there's going to be a convergence of all these things. We're going to do a little renovation soon. All of the work with graphene and 2D layers, I think it's going to really pay off in terms of our understanding of the sort of diffusion reaction mechanism that is the universe. Quantum mechanics in matrix form. Nice, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna write that down. Does this get saved? I don't even know what the hell's going on with this thing. Yeah, I was watching this. There's this physics guy. I don't know. He's got short hair. He always just does like a standing up green board thing. It's just his name, Philman something. And as I said, I mean, I think I agree with him in almost everything. It's like all of it is like inertia and rotations and quaternions kind of thing, where it's like, well, you moved forward this way, so now you're rotating in that dimension because that's the way things connect. And I think Spiegelman, that guy, he makes these cool models in plastic. It's like three rotating like gears that interlock. It's like you pull here, and because you pulled this one out, these two rotate that way. And then if you had pulled one of those two would rotate counterclockwise to each other, etc. Yeah, I got that written down. I'm gonna look for it. Do they still have that thing? I haven't, because I'm, you know, just haven't got around to it. But they were doing that brilliant, wasn't it brilliant Curiosity Stream curiosity stream combo. Yeah, yeah, Segerman. Because it's beautiful. I mean, he makes all these like great, like crazy interlocking models, and it's like this is the kind of stuff that, like, you know, I bet soon he'll be able to make some kind of like little protein model out of plastic, like one of those tiny mechanisms that like crawls down the DNA or something like that. Yeah, it's an exciting time, I gotta say, if we survive. Now we will. We will. Try and be confident. We'll remediate all the crap we've done already in the next. That'll be the mission for the. That's going to be the mission for this century. I think is remediation of the planet. That'll be the theme for this century. Yeah, and I don't know. Have you ever watched Huygens Optics channel as well? He does some really interesting stuff, and he did this deep dive into the photon, and it's just so intriguing because he, like, you know, he's approaching it just like from very, 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 very just like experimental physicist kind of approach to deconstruct a photon. And he came out too, and it's like, wait, this doesn't make sense. It can't be a particle. It can't be corpuscular. That wouldn't make sense, because essentially it's an electrical field, and the electrical field extends in all directions out into space infinitely. You know, we draw it as limited, but really it would be going infinitely, because otherwise we can't tell where they are. Yeah, yeah, Huygens optics. Really, really interesting stuff. Well, I mean, in a way, that's true, right? Consciousness is like this ball of energy that all these forces are Im- impacting on. It's like the surface of confluence, right? And that's what the world is all these forces impinging on this place, and our consciousness is the looking out from that same place where all these forces are impinging. Sort of like what was the thing I compared it to? It's like, let's say you have a sphere when you're a baby, you're a perfect sphere, right? But everything that happens to you, so you reflect the universe perfectly. But every single time something interacts with you, it creates a change in the shape and the conformity of the surface. So now your view is skewed because the surface you're reflecting has been impinged upon, and that shapes us. And that's what we are. It's like our brains are like the surface that has been that the universe has shaped. Yeah, drop it someplace, not here. Can you drop it in one of my like any other video? Because I just don't know how whether these comments last, or whether I'm posting this or this gets posted, or I don't know how this works exactly. But that way I can definitely go back and copy it down. But it doesn't need to be that complicated. I mean, even the Friedman method, the gravity equation says, let's take out lambda for a second. Gravity equation says the universe gets more dense. Every single second, it's like gravity is going to be crushing into itself. This is the curve of the universe. This is the de Sitter part of the universe. And then neutron decay is the anti-de Sitter part of the universe, right? Because it's expansion and contraction, expanding and contracting simultaneously. It comes into us but our reflection is the reverse. I wouldn't say the proton, I would say the mass in the middle of the proton. But actually, yeah, the proton, I guess the way the charges are spinning around the proton, maybe. Though I really think it's more like a neutron. Yes. But that's why it's like, if that's true that a photon of 2 pi Planck length, then whatever Herr Unziger wishes, Planck length is it's like an innate physical quality of the universe. Well, yeah, limits. The infinitesimal is a limit, and the Planck is the infinitesimal of this universe. Operationally, there might be things smaller, but if we know that we can never detect them because we can never make a photon, there's no such thing as a particle that can have an energy, because the innate quality of space determines that it would break down and have decomposed because you got near that kind of energy. So can we just say the Planck is the infinitesimal, and that's that, and accept? I don't know if that Roberts. I think it's that guy. Memes. Is Memes still around? No, but I think he knows that. There might be some overlaps. I really don't. All I do is think about my stuff and research stuff on. Like, I found all these papers that are like, there's all these astronomers, observational astronomers, who are looking at data saying, looks to me like there's ginormous clouds of atomic hydrogen out there. But it's really hard to tell because atomic hydrogen is extremely hard to detect. Like, there's a bunch of papers. And I just think it's like anything that doesn't, I would just, what upsets me is that, like, even Kurt, who's a Canadian, and I really want to be nice to him because of that, Canadian. But it's like, it makes me want to start a channel, except I'm too lazy. To be like, listen, each person, actually, maybe I will do that channel, and that way I don't have to do anything. Okay, you get, it's like you get 10 minutes. Explain your theory of everything in 10 minutes, send me the video, and I will post it. And it will be the Theories of Everything channel, the actual Theories of Everything channel. Rather than being, let's look at this theory again from another guy who's going to basically describe it the same way, but maybe with a little tweak. And then standard model, yeah, but with like, but maybe. Oh, do I have a figure eight? See, this is not. Right? This is the core, this is the neutron, this is the event horizon, where everything gets twisted up, and there's a double layer, basically. Boop. And this is why I'm all about Shirley's surface, because the beauty is you fall in and then you become the other side. You're an anti-neutron. You're a neutron. You're an anti-neutron. You're a neutron. Anti-neutron. Antimatter. And that way the whole universe can be contained in a one-sided surface. And if it's a one-sided surface, this is why, even if it's infinite, conservation. Because if the universe was infinite otherwise, it would seem like there's no real good reason to have conservation unless there's a geometric reason. You know, it just seems to me like, why? But any model, anytime we want to try and get something, you got to push to get a pull. Yeah, well, that's the crazy thing about this, right? Because you can also go like this, and you just distribute that twist over the entire distance. And this is what I learned from doing portaging and basketry and stuff like that, right? Like this is the fundamental, because it's like 8. You've now distributed that torsion around the entire surface again. It doesn't have to be this catastrophic point. You don't have to always see it that way. Again, it's like, this is the same knot. We're just looking at it a different way. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, look at these other properties that maybe it has. Yeah, I got my whole knot collection here, right? Anyway, okay, my phone is gonna die, but this has been awesome, and I think we should do this more. I'd love to do it on your channel, memes and whatever, just so we can like chit chat about like these specifics and taking some time, because I know I can be super condensed in my videos. It's just like therefore. Yeah, totally. Awesome. Okay, we're gonna say peace out. Oops. However we do this. See y'all later. And yeah, cool deal. Boop, 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 boop.